By way of introduction, Dweck, first of all, thank you for coming and welcome to our synagogue. The last of the Nevi'im, Malachi, in his second to last chapter of the entire Tanakh, dedicates a number of psukim as a rebuke to the Kohanim of his day. And he speaks very harshly to how low they have gone, and he laments the absence of rabbinic leadership and spiritual guidance in his day, and he then reminisces of what a Kohen was meant to be. And he describes that a Kadosh Baruch Hu, God, made a pact with the Kohanim. Beriti hayta ito hachayim v'hashalom. The Kohen, the spiritual leader, was meant to carry a life. He was meant to transmit life and peace. And Torah temet hayta b'fihu. There was words of Torah in his mouth. B'shalom u'b'meishor halachini. He walked in a way of shalom, in a way of justice, in a way of peace. And finally, siftei kohen yishmeru dat v'torah yivakshu mipihu. Such a person who led people in a way of meishor, in a derech yeshara, in a good way, in a way of justice, attracted people. People listened to him. They viewed his words and they viewed his mouth as those of a malach. Rabbi Dweck just so happens to be a Kohen. And in the 21st century, we look toward that ideal of rabbinic leadership. And really, what I've learned, what I've seen, what I've heard from Rabbi Dweck is that in so many ways he represents that. It's our honor to have you here in the synagogue. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome.
Thank you. With the permission of Rabbi Maman, the Marad De'atra, it is my honor to be here. You should know that this synagogue has a very great, beautiful reputation. First of all, the reputation is one in where the synagogue is open and thinking and recognizing that Judaism is fluid and moving, and that it is necessary to respond to its movement. Yet, at the same time, the synagogue has a great deal of respect for Torah and the Hachamim, and they are constantly looking in humility, along with their fervor and excitement, to be able to do what is right in terms of the breed that we have with Kadosh Baruch. And so it's always it's tremendous kavod to be able to be here, and I thank the Rabbi for welcoming me so graciously, and for the Kahal, taking out your Sunday morning. Could be doing other things on Sunday morning. Rafa's going to be playing at 1, I think, so we'll make sure to get done by then. But to be able to spend this time, I think, to think about where we are and what we're doing, especially before Pesach, it's a special opportunity. So the fact that so many people have come to think together with me is a great thing, and it's a very special thing. So please God, B'ezrat Hashem, I want to share a few ideas with you. I don't think it's anything groundbreaking, but I will say this. The time. So is that correct? That's 10:15.
So that's about 2 minutes back.
It's 2 minutes back. All right. So what we'll try to do is I'll try to go for about 50 minutes, and then I really would like to open up for question and discussion for those who want to stay, and I'm prepared to stay for a bit, for a while, a little time, to be able to answer those questions. Because I think that what I'd like to speak about this morning, so the title of the discussion is Religion a Threat to Freedom? It touches all of us. It touches all of us. And so, I chose that title. Usually it takes me a very long time to choose a title. I don't really like that part of the whole lecture thing. I hate choosing the titles. I got something gimmicky, and there's people that come for it, whatever it is. But, this one was fairly quick. I was talking to Ephraim, what should we talk about? I said, why don't we just do this? And the reason I chose that, and I wanted to speak about it here, is because first of all, I tend to think that in this Beit Knesset, people can hear that and recognize that there's actually something to talk about, and that the question is a valid question. But we're coming on to Pesach, and so our minds are constantly thinking about freedom, engaged in the questions of freedom. But we have this other thing that's kind of the elephant in the room that nobody speaks about, and that's the religion. And what do we do when we feel that there are elements of religion that are withholding our capacity for freedom? So we sit and talk about this all the time in Judaism. I mean, you know, every other word, you know, every other line that we talk about is Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. Remember, we came out of Mitzrayim. God is, you know, his claim to fame is that he took us out of Mitzrayim. This is the major thing. So we're free, and we're free, and we're free. And yet, in the discussions that we have with anybody who's at all awake, and I mean that, anyone who is at all awake, doesn't matter whether they're wearing the religious costume, not wearing the religious costume, they're engaged, not engaged, it doesn't matter. Everyone in their private discussions are discussing in some way or another how we are restricted and how there is elements that are simply not viable in terms of our religious life. So we feel very much that although we are constantly Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, we nonetheless feel that there's dissonance in that there must be something that we are paying only lip service to. That we can sit and talk about Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, and that we can talk about Zman Cherutenu, and we can talk about what it means to be free, and we can sit and philosophize, and every year we'll get another Haggadah to find something else to say at the Seder, because we've said all the stuff before, and yet we still end up saying the same stuff, and whatever it is. And we pretend that we are all about freedom, and yet we carry on our backs all of this restriction. And I'm going to define what I mean by restriction, because we have to define it. And we carry on this way, and the only thing that we do really is kind of, you know, we have these quiet murmurings amongst us, thinking, you know, okay, so how long are we going to go through these steps and pretend on the one hand that we're free people and celebrate freedom, and yet on the other hand, we are not necessarily living in a way that allows for us to genuinely be free. So that's the thesis for the thing. Is that clear? Yeah? Okay, so anybody who disagrees with that, now is your opportunity. You know, this was the wrong class for you. All right, that's what I want to look at. I think to start with, we have to differentiate between Torah and religion. It's a key differentiation, okay? Because we have to recognize that Torah is not first and foremost a religion. What do I mean by religion? We have to define terms before we go any further. We have to define religion, we have to define freedom. So when we're talking about, when I say religion, which is all that's important right now, when I say religion, what I mean is the behaviors, structures, actions, mores, morals, and so on, that we subscribe to as a group in terms of our practice in life. Okay? So Torah is not necessarily a religion. So in Hebrew, the word dat is more a word that expresses the manners and ways and approaches, behaviors, all kind of fall into this word. Okay? That's what the word dat means. So you'll see in the Megillah, you know, the Haman says to Ahasuerus, Dateh HaMelech enam osim. They're not doing the datim of the Melech, or the datot of the Melech. The edicts, the proclamations, the manners of behavior, and so on that the king says, these guys, these Jews, they don't do your dat, they do a different dat. So that's one thing, okay? And we have a religion. We call it Judaism. And it's been around for a long time. I mean, it's remarkable. It's been around and it's been functioning for about 2,000 years. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, but for all intents and purposes, the very fact that we're sitting in a synagogue today, and we can call it a synagogue and recognize it as a synagogue, and we tend to recognize ourselves going to the synagogue, we recognize Judaism. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. It wouldn't be a thing. So it's running. Torah is not that. Torah, essentially, provides us a vision for a life that is nationalistic. What Torah is a provision for a nation to live as a sovereign people. So we tend to look at Torah through religious eyes. But remember that religion is a question of our behaviors. Yes, God's involved in both, right? We hope. Religion is less likely. But essentially, religion is a question of behaviors, whereas Torah is presenting for us a system of life, along with law and principle, that is meant to be embedded in a sovereign nationalistic life, yes? Yes. In other words, it's like the Ramban Nachmani says that the entirety of Torah is mitzvot tliyot ba'aretz. Right? All of the mitzvot are tied to the aretz. They're meant to be done in Eretz Yisrael. So you ask lulav and etrog, what is this crazy lulav and etrog that we've all got, we're running around, walking around the Teva, yeah, okay, in Poland it looks like really, really weird. It works weird anyway. But you don't find etrog and lulav in Poland. The Torah is telling you to take the local flora that is recognizable as being the prominent flora that are there. And yes, the Torah had to choose something, so it didn't choose that, but it's choosing Eretz Yisrael stuff. Use this stuff, and you carry your flora, and you recognize it as being valuable to you. Okay, so I can get it. All of a sudden, everything makes more sense when it's embedded in Eretz Yisrael, which essentially is meant to be our national own, as a sovereign nation in this place. So that's what Torah is. And so when you look at Torah and say, now how am I supposed to manifest this law? You look at Parashat Shoftim. Parashat Shoftim says, look, this is how you manifest the government that will adjudicate, maintain, and regulate this law. So, the rabbi's talking about the Kohanim. So the Kohanim are integral to this. The Kohanim, the Shoftim, the judges, there's police, there's the king, there's the Kohen Gadol. Everybody's got their role in government. So this is a question of being a sovereign nation on this earth. That's why we don't call non-Jews goyim. We call other nations goyim, the same way we call ourselves a goy. Right? The goy gadol hazeh. Am chacham v'navon, a goy gadol hazeh. So, you guys, you will keep this law, says Moshe Rabbeinu on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You will be spoken about by the other nations of the world as being a great, wise, amazing nation. And who are the others? The other nations. They're goyim. But they're not non-Jews. If you're talking in a religious sense, then they're non-Jews. And the funny thing is that you read the Mishnah Berurah, and he doesn't talk about the goyim. He talks about Eino Yehudi, a non-Jew. So when I'm talking about a Jew or Judaism, I'm talking about something else entirely. I'm talking about a construct. So before we get into the construct, I want to round out what it means that Torah is essentially a principle of law for a nation. So the entirety of the Torah is meant to be a framework for responsive life. That's why I have the court. That's why all of it is essentially presented to me in Shoftim. Shoftim means the judges. And what do you do with the judges? As it says in the parasha, if you have a question as per the law, or how it is that this law should be adjudicated, and you've gone through the systems of the courts and how it is that they adjudicate it, you get to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court will decide. And so it says in general, you go to the judge that is in those days. And so Rashi says, what else would you go to? I mean, if everybody's dead, where else are you going to go? It's the only thing relevant to you is the judge that's in your days. I mean, stop looking up the books and worrying about what people said 100 years ago. Obviously, if it's going to be a living law, then it needs to be a law that is living, and people that are alive and responsive to the nature of life. So this is what it's meant to be, and that's fine when you can become a sovereign nation. But this nation is sovereign with a very unique aspect to it, and that is that, God's in it with us, which complicates things. Because it means that it is a nation that essentially lives within covenant. We're not just governing ourselves because we happen to like, a gathered group. This is something that from the very beginning was a joint endeavor with God. But it was a joint endeavor with nationalistic vision. So when we start with Avraham Avinu, our goal is to ultimately manifest as a nation with covenant with God. And that's the idea. So what that means is, I don't have the option as this sovereign nation to be a sovereign nation outside of covenant. I can try. Nothing's stopping me from trying, right? But the covenant is there. And the covenant has to be recognized. And so the entirety of Torah is presented within the context of covenant. And that's the entire thing. So all of these questions of, what's the point of a religious doctrine? We look at Torah as being, what's the point of a religious life? Well, it's morals, or it's ethics, or it's law, or it's all of the above, or it's a way to be able to get people to live together. Like the Rambam writes in the Moreh Nevuchim. People do this to the Rambam all the time, the Torah. They pull one line out of the Moreh Nevuchim or one line out of the Mishneh Torah. They forget that he wrote anything else in his life, and they find something that he likes, that they like that he said, and then all of a sudden they're Rambamniks. An element of the mitzvot. But the Rambam also writes that the entire point of a mitzvah is in order to be able to have a relationship with God, and it's the only access that we've got. And that it's wonderful that our capacity to be able to have a relationship with God and our ability to be able to refine ourselves in terms of our behaviors and thoughts creates a fantastic society. I mean, it's beautiful, right? I mean, it's one thing if you say, God tells you, listen, this is what you've got to do to connect to me. Okay, how's that work? Society is going to break down, but you better rough it. Tough it out, but this is how, the only way you can connect. No, the beauty of the Torah is that when one engages in a manner which allows one to connect with God, society forms beautifully. You sense what the value of a relationship is. You sense sensitivity between one person and another person, what it takes in order to be able to coalesce and have emergent and meta-identities, and so on and so forth, and how to be able to have a symphony, and how to be able to have all of these things in culture and life, all within the framework of connecting to the source of life itself. How much more beautiful can something be? This is a 3,000-year-old vision. It's fantastic. The problem is when one is not interested, or a nation is not interested in living in covenant, which it's rough. I mean, let's be honest. It's the most difficult thing for us to do. Love is the most difficult thing for us. Let's put that out there in the middle of the Buberian space. The Buberian space. Mark Buber, brilliant. Mark Buber, in his I Am Thou, which takes 472 years to read. It's a little small book. But you've got to read like 3 words at a time in order to be able to know what the heck the man is saying. But he's saying valuable things in the book. It's one of his more difficult works. But in I Am Thou, one of the things that he puts out is that a relationship exists in the space between the two sides of the relationship. And so there's a relationship that is created, and there's space between the two entities. Why am I saying 2 entities instead of 2 people? Because it doesn't have to be 2 people. It could be 2 nations. And there's Buberian space. I call it the Buberian space, right? But essentially, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 brothers, 2 lovers, 2 nations. It doesn't matter. When we're talking about Rav and Talmid, it doesn't matter what it is. When we're talking about 2 entities attempting to coalesce, to join, to engage with one another, there is a space that manifests between them. The Benekirub, beautiful, right? So there's this space that manifests between them. And what you put into that space is what defines the milieu or the ambiance of the relationship. And it's possible to pollute the space. It's absolutely possible to pollute it. As a matter of fact, most of us do. We totally destroy the space. And so we feel, without saying it, that the space is toxic. And so how do we respond to a toxic space? Usually we respond in one of two ways. We either pull back and just don't engage in the space, or we rage and scream and yell and so on and so forth because we can't manage to manifest calmly and peacefully in that space because we sense it as threatening. There are ways to heal and cleanse that space, but it's extremely difficult. It's not easy. So if we've got that situation between us and God, this is like the Achabim say, there's a sin'ah kavusha. Buber is he's not mechadesh anything over here. He's just articulating this. He's putting it out very beautifully, but he's absolutely right. There's no question about it, but it's all through Torah, this space. So it'll say that, between God and Israel, there's a sin'ah kavusha. There is a undercover hatred that runs between the two of them, throughout history. We can't stand each other. And yet there's this love-hate relationship, that we have. You don't, I'm not looking at you, you don't look at me. I see you not looking at me, I'm not looking at you either. This is what goes on between us and God. So love is the most difficult thing for us to ultimately achieve. Because it requires us not only to be vulnerable and open, it requires us to accept the love that is offered. And my daughter, it's one of her favorite books. This book, this teen book. I mean, she's amazing. She's reading everything. But this book, the Wallflower book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Right. So it's a fantastic book. It's a fantastic book. It's much better actually in my opinion than The Catcher in the Rye. It's the same kind of book, basically. But I think that it's much better. And so anyway, read the book. But there's one line in the book in where this kid who's trying to understand relationships and trying to understand the whole way that people interact and what love is and how people treat each other. So he has this one teacher that really cares about him, and his teacher keeps giving him books to read because he sees that he really likes to read and he's interested and he's thinking. And he asks his teacher, he says, why do people act like this with each other? And his teacher, the line is, he says, people accept the love that they think they deserve. Brilliant line. It's a simple line, it's a brilliant line, but that's true. We accept the love that we think we deserve. And that, we keep talking about how difficult it is to love. It's more difficult to accept love. We don't think about that part, right? We only think about us giving love. We only think about us being able to receive love and how uncomfortable it is for us to do. We don't realize, we can't really articulate and speak out how difficult it is for us to admit that I don't believe that I am worthy of the love that you think you're out of your mind giving me. You've got to be out of your mind. And we feel this way. We're embarrassed to say that we feel this way, but so many of us deal with this. The kind of self-esteem it requires in order for somebody to be genuinely open and ready to be able to receive love rather than to give love? None of us, I'm willing to bet, I would bet my bottom pound on this question. The adjustment of speech, I can't tell you how. I cannot even begin to tell you how difficult it is. Like the calisthenics that I have to do to be able to. But I'm telling you, 99% of us in the audience, if not 100% of us, have this problem on one level or another. Because if we have any level of difficulty in terms of our own self-worth and self-esteem, which all of us, you don't get through childhood without being tortured in some capacity. Some more, some less, whatever it is. Some people really just get out, they're just, we don't like them. But the other people that are regular people, this is a problem. We accept the love that we think we deserve. And that goes with God. And it starts at the very beginning. It's the most beautiful Rashi. We read past this Rashi, we read past this Pasuk without even realizing. The Bnei Israel, they do this whole thing with the Meraglim, right? So, it's a disaster. They come back, it's a bad report, the whole thing falls apart. And the response is, no, okay, we made a mistake, recalibrating, we're going to go in now. And Moshe says, no, you can't go in. Can't go in. God's not going to be with you if you go in. They don't listen, they go in, they get pulverized. Literally, it says, like, Ketuotam, ad horma. So Moshe is recounting this story in Devarim. And Moshe gives his own commentary on this. And you said, he talking to Bnei Israel, he says, and you said, B'sid'at Adonai otan. God hated us. And that's why he pulled us through this entire mess. And what Moshe says, it's in the Psukim. What Moshe says, God hated you. Should we go through the events and actually talk this out realistically? He took you out on the wings of eagles. He protected you and carried you and watched you. Literally, this is the dialogue of Moshe to Bnei Israel. He's like proving to them, how could you call that hatred? Rashi, on the Pasuk, is essentially Freudian. In other words, he's thinking like a psychotherapist. And what he says is the people were projecting their feeling of hatred onto God. They hated God. God didn't hate them. They hated him. They couldn't stand it. And they hated your entire life as a beaten slave? Who loves you? And what do you need? And how valuable is your life? And so on and so forth. And here you have a God that's, pulverizing the world power to be able to take you out on the wings of eagles. As he himself says, I took you out on the wings of eagles. I hate you. No, you're just not ready for my love. That's the problem. It's okay. We have all the time in the world. I'll get you there. We're still on the path. It takes a long time. But the initial response was, God must hate us. And she says, no, you're projecting. It's brilliant. It's the most brilliant vision. You're projecting your hatred onto God. God doesn't hate you. We do this all the time. Why am I telling you this? Because when we understand that the entire nature of Torah essentially is covenant, what we're talking about is love and relationship. And the bottom line is just we were not prepared. We just weren't prepared. And so we took time out. Hey, look, if you can't live in the house with me, and we can't have a relationship, then maybe we need to separate for a while. I mean, I'll be watching you. I'm not saying we're not divorcing. There's a covenant, right? So I'm holding fast to the covenant. There may be some casualties along the way, I'll tell you that. But, we're spending time. You go and find yourself. And we're there. I mean, that's where we are, right? We're out there finding ourselves. So what do we do as a result of that? So the people that recognized in the nation that this is what it was about, there are always those, right? We always had those. We always had maybe a select few people that realized that this is about covenant, and it's about relationship, and it's about building something together with God. It's about us finding ourselves in order that we should be able to share ourselves. Because how is somebody supposed to share themselves if you don't even know who the hell you are? Right? I mean, we don't talk about that either. How am I supposed to share myself if I don't even have a sense of my own self? I mean, this was the most difficult thing for me, just being a rabbi. I grew up in front of the entire community. And sharing it personally was the most difficult. I didn't even know that I had the problem. Okay, yeah, I'll take that. I'm 24 years old. Why not? Okay, I learned enough, more or less. I'll figure it out along the way. But as a rabbi, you have to share yourself with hundreds of people. And the hundreds of people don't realize that there's other people. I see the rabbi smiling. You don't realize that you have a unique relationship with 300 people. And if you don't know who you are, and who the hell knows who they are at 24 years old, to share yourself with anyone is a tremendous challenge. And so the first order of business, and the most important order of business, is to be able to discover who it is that you are. And you take the time in order to be able to do that. And you know what you're able to do in terms of your current situation, in terms of what it is that you can give. And when a person is able to be aware of that, then they manage. And you don't beat yourself up with guilt over the fact that, it's just not, I'm not a people person, or whatever the case may be. So you have people in the nation that understand that this is the point. It's covenant. Now, if we're going out, if we're separating, if we're stepping out of home, and we are no longer sovereign as a nation on our land, we are people displaced. So there's no better place than the United States of America to be able to analogize, to give analogy for this. I do it even in Britain, because it's a mess over there. They don't have this. They don't have a sense of a nation that is founded upon an ideal. It's the queen, or whoever the monarch is, because what it is you have a group of people that are self-governing, that have been self-governing for who knows how many years. They have an entity, and don't get me wrong, I love the queen. May she live long. God save the queen. And there's something that she brings to the nation that we do not have here. I am absolutely convinced, without a question in my mind, that the fact that that nation has maintained a monarchy throughout history for the last 1,000 years and didn't collapse with the rest of Europe is the reason why you don't have Amalek in that country, and why that country fought Amalek. Because the only opposite of minut, which essentially is the entirety of Amalek, is malchut. And she has retained the most important part of Malchut. Everybody thinks she doesn't have any power. Big deal. No, that's not the point. The point is that she retains the most important part of Malchut, which is an emergent identity. Which is an identity that no matter how many times you change prime ministers, she's always there. And she becomes the face and representing the nation to itself. They have an identity. They have memory. Those are the things that you need in order to be able to manifest against the Malale, which is why they're pulling away from the rest of the insane continent.
Amen.
I mean, I'm not allowed to talk about that back home. You know, I have to maintain. They all know it, but the bottom line is. But it's why that country just can't. It won't maintain. It always will pull away. It will always maintain its island status. But there's something they don't have that we do here. And that is that we are built on an ideal. You don't grow up in the United States, well maybe you do now, I don't know anymore. But we didn't grow up in the United States of America without constantly recognizing, thinking, being instilled within us that we are free. And that freedom is our greatest ideal. We don't know what freedom is, but that's what we're told. And we know that we risk that at all odds. You don't risk freedom if you're an American. And so, imagine if, God forbid, China came in and took over America and displaced the American people, and where we were no longer sovereign on our land. And there were those among us who lived for the American ideal and understood what it meant to be Americans and had hope and faith that one day we would come back to the United States on our sovereign soil. What would we do in order to be able to set ourselves up for the return? We would somehow package the most important aspects of American ideals and life and make it portable. Yeah? I mean, if you were really smart, that's what you would do. And that's precisely what the Hachamim did. They created Judaism. But Judaism was a portable, nationalistic framework. Except that when you go through 2,000 years of waves of difficulty, you protect yourself in any way that you can. And so it becomes something that you hold as a protection rather than something that you hold as a hope for a future. So in 2,000 years, Judaism has become all we are. We have forgotten that we are hoping to get back to become a nation. Even now with Israel, right? I mean, Israel complicates everything because it's forcing us to remember that. You cannot be a Jewish person, I don't care how observant or non-observant you are. You cannot be a Jewish person and not question what Israel means to you. You can't. You can pretend that it's not there. You can say it doesn't mean anything to you. But you have to ask the question. You can't be a Jewish person and not question what Israel means to you. And that wasn't the case for 2 millennia. You could be very happy in your little neighborhood, in your little community, and you have your little rabbi, and he does what you tell him to do, and so on and so forth. You have your little structures, your Bet Knesset, as long as your name's on the door, and on the candlesticks, and on the thing, and on the clock, and on the vents of the air conditioner, you got your name. You have your life and presence. You know who you are. Who needs anything more? So sometimes you have a golden age, sometimes it's a bronze age, sometimes it's just tin, maybe it's, maybe it's clay. It doesn't matter, it's my clay. It's my clay. And we don't need anything more. So in the essence of Judaism, which was a holy endeavor, look, I mean, you can't discount the fact that this thing has survived for 2,000 years. It's still the oldest religion. It's crazy. It's falling apart with all the other religions, but it's still the oldest. That's not a small thing. That means that the people that essentially decided to pack up the national identity into a portable entity were brilliant in their thinking. And when you look at it carefully, you realize that in that packing was included the capacity to respond to change. As a matter of fact, almost more than ever. Because who the heck knows where we were going to go? We had no idea where we were going. At this point already, where haven't we been? You know, I mean, it's not a language we have to learn, not a culture. I mean, we've been everywhere. And everywhere our Torah has come with us. It's the only thing that has come with us everywhere, which you cannot negate. It's the one thing that has been with us no matter where we've gone. It's our Torah. It's unbelievable. It's shocking. So when I realize that, there's only one question that I can ask. Is the religion still functioning as a system to A, maintain my identity as a national group, and ultimately as an individual? And B, is it still providing me the opportunity to respond to a changing world from my native framework? You hear that? I think that's very important. I'll repeat that if I have to, because that's the core of the entire question. So if I recognize that what Judaism is a construct, it's a construct that is meant to help me maintain my nationalistic identity and frame of thought in any given situation. If I recognize that that's what Judaism is meant to be, my question regarding its functionality, right, its functionality has to focus on a question ultimately of freedom. Why? Because if you're going to look at the national entity of Israel, the foundation stone of the people is freedom. And freedom only as a means to an end. It's not the end. I mean, freedom is not the goal. Freedom is only a means to the end of what? Me being able to achieve my full self so that I can have a relationship and share it. That's the point of freedom. Which is why when HaKadosh Baruch Hu talks to us about freedom, it's never, remember you're free people. It's remember, you're free people because I took you out on the wings of eagles. And I brought you to me so I could be for you a God and you could be for me a people. It's all replete with love and relationship. But if you're not a free person, then how on earth are you supposed to engage in a relationship and share yourself? You can't even discover yourself. You can't even achieve yourself. Freedom is a means to an end. You hear this? And so if my religion is a construct, and it was built by brilliant leaders to allow for me to maintain the core elements of my national identity, when it is no longer doing that, it has failed. And when do I know that it's no longer doing that? When my capacity for freedom is strangulated and shrunken. Okay, so we now have to define what freedom is. So we've said many, many times, anybody who's listened to anything that I've ever said on Pesach, right, knows that freedom is not the ability to do what you want. It includes that. You need to be able to do what you want, but freedom is the capacity to become what you want. To create a reality for yourself. And that means that you have to be able to choose and affect reality with your choices. Which means, simply put, your choices need to be able to make a difference. And if our choices don't make a difference, then we're not free. Because it makes no difference. It's simple as that. Which is why all of Pesach night is about difference. Right? It's Madishta night. What's the difference? That's all. It's the whole thing. So when I realize that, I have to take that question and insert it back into the question of Judaism. Is Judaism providing me the capacity to be able to become what I wish? Now, Torah always provides that capacity. And that's what we don't realize, right? So the Hachamim say this very counterintuitive statement where they say, "En lecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'Torah." There's no such thing as a free person unless they are engaged in Torah, which is a convenient thing for the rabbis to say. You don't realize, I'm telling you, you're not free. Okay, but anyone who's sophisticated and understands freedom, it's like Benjamin Franklin said, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact, but essentially Benjamin Franklin said that a people without virtue cannot be free. And this is a mistake that everybody makes. You know, you look at the Arab Spring, you think it's the greatest thing in the world. You know, people fighting for their freedom. They don't even know how to be free. They don't know how to be free. They can't have freedom if you don't know how to be free. You understand what it's like? You know, why don't you just give a 3-year-old to drive a car? You know, he's free. He'll kill everybody on the road, you know, along with him. But it's you know, full carte blanche. You know, you just give him everything. Just let him go. It takes responsibility to be free. And as we've said many, many times before, responsibility means the capacity to respond. That's literally what it means. You sense a reality. You realize that there is now something required of you as a result of the reality that's in front of you, and you respond accordingly. If you're not capable of doing that, you don't have responsibility, and then you cannot have freedom. Freedom in the hands of somebody who has no sense of responsibility is a lethal weapon. And the first person who dies is the person wielding the weapon. It's not an ideal that is meant for everybody. It's a very sophisticated weapon. You know, we think that, you know, it's always better. It's not better. That's not true. It's good to have slavery sometimes. When people don't know how, you have to teach them how to be able to have freedom. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do with Israel? He gives us Torah. And it's pretty harsh, you know, out of the gate. You mess up and you're dead. No, really. There's no room for mess up at the first days. I mean, you know, it's set. You know, the repercussions are set. You don't have any doubt. You know, if you mess up, what's going to happen. But you know that this is the way you're supposed to raise children, right? You don't say bedtime is 8 o'clock and then let them go to bed at 9:30. You teach the child only one thing when that's the case. What I say is not meaningful. What you do is not meaningful. What you choose has absolutely no difference, makes no difference whatsoever. There is no reality that you have to worry about. Good, so I'm living in the middle of nowhere. I'm living in white noise. Fantastic. I don't exist, you don't exist, my bedtime doesn't exist, nothing exists. Okay, so I'm a nihilist from the age of 2. I'm serious, it's not a joke. You raise little nihilists. If you're not firm about bedtime. I'm not kidding. You think I'm kidding? This is not a joke. You'll know when it's a joke. This is serious. If you raise a child and you tell a child, if you do that, you're not having dessert, and the child negotiates dessert, you have created a nihilist. I'm not kidding. You don't understand how horrible that is. You don't understand how horrible and it's abusive to the child. It's child abuse. It destroys a child's identity. When you say something, that's why you have to be very careful about what you say. I used to always tell my teachers all the time, say what you mean and mean what you say. And they would go, say what you mean. Don't say beating around the bush statements. When you want to say something, say what you mean. Articulate yourself clearly. And when you say it, mean it. I told that to all my teachers. And as a parent, you have to know that as well. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Otherwise, you create little nations of Amalek all over the place. Because if you tell me that my bedtime is 8:30, and I know that you know that I know that you know that that's a bunch of nonsense, then what are we doing? Playing a silly game over here. Okay, Mom, no problem. You're irrelevant. Which means that I'm irrelevant. Which means that my bedtime, you see, it's a disaster, and that creates the most toxic Buberian space between parent and child that you could imagine. So what does God do as we come out of Egypt? You do X, you're a dead man. Oh, were you upset that you dropped dead? I'm sorry. I told you. Horrible evil God. No, that's not a horrible evil God. That's just setting a situation in where you know my parameters. That's all. I'm not messing around. Because I love you. And you matter. And it means something, what you do. It makes a difference. You will not live with me and think that what you do doesn't make a difference. So where are we living today? We're living today in a situation. We have begged and pleaded that what we do shouldn't make a difference. And so it doesn't. And that's the experience of our lives. So what happens with regards to the religion? Well, when the religion is no longer a mechanism in which we can use a framework of Torah to live our lives in diverse situations, which is what it was. And it functioned that way many times. I mean, I'll give you a Pesach example. Very simple example. We never sold chametz. It's nonsense about selling chametz. It's a disgusting thing that we do. What is it? You know, you keep your freezer full of, you know, your pita breads and your challahs, and God forbid you should throw out your blue label and the whole, you know, pour it down the sink like you're supposed to. No, God forbid, that's not going anywhere. We'll just sell it. You think anybody sold chametz? You can't find it. Go look in the Shulchan Aruch. You figure, you know, you figure you're going to find a siman selling your chametz. You know? You figure that the Rambam's going to have a whole perek on mechirat chametz. It doesn't exist. You have to like look through it with, you know, you have to look through the fine print to find one line that somebody said, you know, if you're stuck on a boat somewhere, and you know you're offering for days, and you know, you've got some non-Jew on the boat, you can say to him, here, take my chametz, maybe I'll take it back from you after a week. You know, hold my bread. You know? It's the most absurd thing. No, everybody says, you know, so you want to sell your chametz? I have it online. You can sell your chametz with me online. I'm serious. Like the rabbi saying, sell it early. By London time, you'll already have your chametz sold before you get up in the morning. We'll take care of it for you. Not a problem. Legally binding. Nobody did that. But in Europe, they had situations in where they had liquor, that they were manufacturing liquor. Mass quantities. And so now what are you supposed to do? You can't tell them, you know, to get rid of your entire merchandise, your whole livelihood's going to be running down the street in rivers of... So what are the Hachamim? The Hachamim say, okay, so we will look and we see, okay, there's this one line here. The whole question is about ownership. There is this opportunity where you can sell chametz. Bali Yireo, Bali Yamatzeh is only if you own it and it's in your possession. We'll allow for them to sell it to That's an innovation. It's a brilliant innovation. It's an innovation that the Hachamim instituted in order that Israel should be able to do Pesach, Kadat v'Chadim. And there's nothing wrong with that. Then you get the old stalwarts on the other side saying, we never sold chametz, you shouldn't sell your chametz. Shut up. Please, move along with the time. Ribbono Shalom. This is what we do now. There's nothing wrong with it. That's what we do. That's where we've moved to. You understand? Good. Okay, so this is what we do. Or, you know, people have these absurd things. You know, well, I sell the mixtures, but I won't sell actual chametz. You know, either you sell it or you don't. Like, I mean, either it works or it doesn't work. You can't have mixtures in your possession either. So either you're selling it appropriately or not selling it appropriately. I don't understand. So there are things that have to happen in terms of religion in order for us to be able to maintain freedom, in order for us to be able to maintain discovery of ourselves, in order for us to be able to share ourselves with God and everyone else around us. Because otherwise what happens is we end up becoming these cocoons of individuals that are not capable of responding to a reality, that are stuck in some imaginary framework of life that closes us off from anything real. Welcome to modern Judaism. Welcome to modern religion. And that's the truth. So there's very serious questions that come up. I just saw last night, I'm ending. So I just saw last night, by who I'm staying with, there's a 60 minutes clip of, you know, this rural town in Mississippi. It's like the poorest place that you've ever seen. I mean, literally, these guys are sitting with overalls, like literally the whole stereotype. You know, overall, you can barely understand what they're saying. You know, they eat fried rattlesnake. I'm serious. They eat fried rattlesnake. That's their favorite thing. You know, you see a rattlesnake, and you go, "God, I'm gonna have some fried rattlesnake." So a very wealthy man hired a master chess player to go into this town and teach the children how to play chess. To give them hope and possibility for life. Because in this place, they don't even entertain that there's anything beyond Frankville, Mississippi. They don't think of possibilities of doing anything else than growing up in Frankville, Mississippi and flipping burgers and just eating and sitting and your kids and your grand, that's what you do. There's no thought, not a dream of anything else. That's slavery. And so what does this guy do, this brilliant philanthropist, what does he do? He teaches them how to play chess. And they love it. And they're brilliant chess players. They can't form a coherent sentence. Wow. They're brilliant chess players. So they ended up competing on the national level, and the 5th graders placed 8th in the country. Wow. And there's this little girl that's saying, you know, her friend was saying, you play with somebody that had a beard. She's playing, they're not playing other 5th graders. They're playing whoever can play them. And suddenly they step out of Frankville, Mississippi. They realize that there are possibilities for their life. They realize that there's something more in the world than just what it is that they're arba'am. And so you know what they do? They learn chess in school. They built a chess center that all the kids go to after school to play chess. And then when they're done there, they go home and play chess. Why am I telling you this? Because that is the essence of freedom. The Ibn Ezra is this beautiful reading. It's 2 words, so you have to read into it a little bit. Where it says, "Vayari b'nei Israel," HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw b'nei Israel, "Vayeda Elohim," and God knew. It's talking about their suffering. Right? He sees them in their slavery. Vayar b'nei, he saw b'nei Israel, "Vayeda Elohim," and he knew. Says Ibn Ezra, what did he know? What was secret among them. What was secret among them? What was secret among them was Vatal Shabbat Elohim min avodah. They called out to God from the work, the slavery, not the suffering, the slavery. That there was something in them that these kids in Mississippi didn't have. Because they were great-grandchildren of Abraham Avinu. They knew deep in their heart that they weren't meant to be slaves. You know, Oprah had a fantastic line about it. I haven't mentioned Oprah in a long time. But she grew up in Mississippi. And she tells about her being a little kid. She was maybe 3, 4 years old. And her grandmother was a maid. And she said, my grandmother was a maid, my great-grandmother was a maid, my mother was a maid, and I was supposed to be a maid. And her grandmother was hanging clothes on the clothesline. And she said to Oprah, she goes, now Oprah, watch what I'm doing, because someday you're going to have to do this for yourself. And Oprah said, and I remember when my grandmother said that to me, I thought in my heart, no, Grandma, I'm not going to do that. That inkling of realizing that this is not your confines is the beginnings of freedom. If Bnei Israel didn't want freedom, didn't call out for freedom, didn't privately, even though they were embarrassed to say it in public, and that's the whole point of the Ibn Ezra. What does it mean by Yeda'alim? God knew. God knew that everyone was thinking about it, but they were embarrassed to say it in public because how crazy could you be? How are you going to get out of this craziness? But everybody felt that it was enough already. And it's the way that we feel, isn't it? We're embarrassed to talk about it. We're embarrassed to say, you know something, it just can't go on like this anymore. But I'm going to tell you something. That's precisely what's meant to be. It's supposed to get to a point in where you can't stand it anymore. And that you realize that your only options are to be a sovereign nation. And that the days of religion are over. I know that's a drastic thing to say, and it may be another 100 years until it actually gets into full manifestation. But it starts at a point, and you know something? We couldn't have this, I couldn't say this 10 years ago. Because it was so underground that literally all you could do was do what is written in the parasha for Shabbat HaGadol, which the Halabi don't have minhag to say, but I'm going to write about it this week, which the complement to Vayeda Elohim in Malachi, right, which the Rabbi mentioned, is Aznid Birui Shel Ra'el. This is the last Navi that is calling out into the expanse of the diaspora, of the exile of 2,000 years. And it's his voice that reverberates throughout the generations. And he says, and there will be a time where two people will talk to each other. And they'll talk about God. They'll be too embarrassed to talk about God in public because they'll have to say Hashem. And nobody will, it's not what they mean. But between each other, they're going to talk about God. And God himself will have his iPad and he'll write down what they're saying so that he can remember it. They're talking about it. In a sea of silence. In a sea of silence where nobody will break the silence. God knows. And it's essentially where it is that we are today. We all know that we can't go on like this. And we're not saying that Chas v'Shalom Torah should fall apart. And none of us want that. What all of us want is Torah to be alive. It's not like the crazy reform movement in Germany, where they only cared about themselves, could care less about covenant. They didn't care about the covenant. They cared about being able to live as Germans in Germany and not lose completely what Jewish, ethnicity meant. That's not what we want. We want Torah. We want to be able to sit and read the Pesukim and feel that they are relevant to us, that they're alive in our hearts and our minds. We are yearning for that. We're dying for that. But we're not brave enough to do what's necessary to get that. And I'm not just saying about fighting for it in the streets. I'm talking about in ourselves we're not brave enough. Because we have to be ready for covenant. And that means that we have to be ready for love. And so this is what I'm going to end with. And it might be jarring, so fasten your seatbelts, but I think that it's very important. I think that was the point of the whole sexual revolution. Of course, sex could always be reduced to sex. That's the most, it's unfortunate that that's the case. But if our entire nature of covenant essentially is in brit, whether it's brit milah, or it's in the sense of being able to engage genuinely in relationship. And the only reason why women don't have brit milah is because the Gemara says they are born brit ready. They don't need a brit milah. Men need the brit milah because we're not born brit ready. Women are born brit ready. So it says in the Gemara, ki mahula damya. She's mahu. In order to be able to have covenant, we have to be prepared to love. And if we didn't have that revolution, we would still be completely stuck in all of our hang-ups about what it is and who it is that we can love. And we just weren't prepared. A man would marry a woman, she cooks, she cleans, she does the services that are necessary, there's conjugal visits and so on and so forth, and that's wonderful. Basically it's a working relationship. And for years and years and years, that was enough. And we blew the top off it. And so now, I did a workshop with my rabbis and my office staff and my youth directors on LGBT issues. I felt that it was very important that they should be able to engage in the questions and situations of people that are living this way, dealing with these things in general, from the inside out, right? Rather than talking about it from some external place, live in it, understand what's happening. And one thing came out, many things came out in in the workshop. But one of the things that came out of the workshop from the youth director our youth director is about 20 years old. He said, in my age group, if any of my friends have a question of choosing between inclusivity and halakha, they will choose inclusivity every single time. And you don't understand how new that is. You don't understand what a massive chidush that is, because when I was a kid, that wasn't true. I'm not that old. I'm old. It wasn't true.
I'm not born
Yeah. What that means for us, I'm going to speak about this B'ezrat Hashem after Pesach in my perspectives. Have you heard the perspective lectures at all?
Yeah.
So in the perspective lectures, this is the next lecture. But this question about love, not just sex, love, who it is that we can love in our lives, how it is that we express love in our lives, what are the barriers in our lives to being able to love someone genuinely, wholly, completely, fully, with appropriate judgment and boundary. We're dealing with that now, for the first time as a society ever. I don't know if people understand the weight of what that means. Humanity has never dealt with this in the way that we're dealing with it now. Never. So for the first time, we are coming to a point where the question of brit is at the forefront with all of these questions. People think the question of homosexuality is its own question. It's not a question on its own. It is a question of love, ultimately. The sex is another question. I mean, it's okay, it's a component of it. But everybody gets fixated on the sex and they don't think about what it teaches the rest of us in terms of who it is that we can love and how we'll love. You understand that for my children, simply because it's out there in dialogue and being spoken about, that my children are much more open to being able to love someone of the same sex than they ever were before. What do I mean love? I mean just be able to show affection and not feel like you're a mess. There's something really wrong with you because you actually want to show affection to somebody that's the same sex as you. Who cares? I'm not talking about sex. We're talking about love. To be able to show affection, to be able to say something nice, warm, caring, loving, and not feel like you're going to be ridiculed as a result of it because you're some wishy-washy. God forbid you should be able to recognize that another man is attractive. Yeah, because you know what it means for a man to think that someone's attractive. First thing you do is take him to bed. So how could you say that? You can't say that. God forbid that you should ever be able to express something like that. Women have no problem with this. We never think there's anything wrong with it. No, she's gorgeous. Oh. No, you can't. Till today, you can't do that. You can't, till now, you cannot do that as a man. Why is this important? Because if the question is a question of covenant, you can't have those hang-ups. They will always destroy you. Because you will always be judging, can I, should I, will I, is it right, isn't that right? And you end up tying yourself in knots. And that's exactly what happened to Israel before the Galut. They couldn't handle a relationship with God. And when God came out and opened his arms and said, here I am, it was too close for comfort. But they weren't ready to share. And so what's happening to us is we're beginning to learn what it means, first of all, to love ourselves. We haven't even understood what that means. Very few people were able to do the Nevi'im, they were the only ones who loved themselves. Imagine being a guy, you have to go and speak to a whole bunch of people and tell them that they're a mess, and you've got this message you've got to put out, right? You have to go say, you have to have some self-confidence in order to be able to do that. And then do it again, and then do it again, and then, they tar and feather you, and you need to go out and do it again. You have to have some real confidence about who you are, your love for God, your love for the people. There used to be Yahideh Segula. This is something that is opened up to the entirety of society today. We don't appreciate what that means. And what it gives us is an opportunity to genuinely, actually have a relationship with God. You hear this? To genuinely value covenant. To love a mitzvah. To kiss and hug a mitzvah, to run after a mitzvah the minute that you see one, because you understand that it is an act of love and you have an opportunity there for you to connect to God Himself through putting tefillin on your arm. When you see that, when you understand what it is, it's not strange and it's not weird. You can't wait to put your tefillin on. So that's where we're at right now, in terms of our society and ultimately in terms of our people. And we are so frustrated that we're trying everything and anything in order to be able to deal with the frustration. Some of it is very self-serving. Some of it we just don't care, so we do whatever it is that we can move through. But this is the crux of the issue. Now that we can't stand it anymore, now that we know that we can't run like this anymore, given our constructs, first of all, we have to start responding. We have to start selling chametz, or wherever it is that it manifests, and that will make the difference between a rabbi and somebody who's an imposter. That's what Chacham Ovadia, alav shalom, when I got my smicha, he said, "You be a rav kemo shene'emar." You know what that means? He said to me. It says in the Torah, "V'chai bahem, v'lo she'amut bahem." The mitzvot are given to us to live by, not to die by. Your job as a rav is to sweat to find the hitter. Anybody can tell the people that it's asur. You don't need a rabbi to tell you that it's asur. You need a rav to tell you why it's mutar and how it's mutar. And that's what he did, and that's what ultimately the rabbanim need to do. Not just to be able to be lenient and liberal, but to be able to open the options of freedom in life so that we can build ourselves, achieve an identity, share ourselves with those around us, and ultimately with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that, one has freedom and geulah and life and beauty. And so I wish everyone a Chag kasher u'sameach that should be zocheh to cherut and geulah, and we should be able to see the people of Israel continuing mechayil and all of their strength and all of their beauty and all of their freedom, so that we genuinely should be able to walk with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on this world in full love and relationship with Him and everyone else around us.